February 15, 1648. Constantinople. The Bosphorus Strait runs black under a moonless sky. On the imperial docks, palace guards load cargo onto waiting boats. But these aren't trade goods or supplies. These are human beings. 280 women. Each one sewn alive into a weighted leather sack. One by one, they disappear beneath the dark waters. By dawn, the most horrific mass murder in Ottoman history is complete. The man who ordered it? The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, the most powerful ruler on earth. His name was Ibrahim I, and this massacre of innocents was just another Tuesday for him. For 6 centuries, this story has been buried, whispered about in historical footnotes, dismissed as exaggeration. But the evidence is undeniable. Palace records, witness testimonies, bodies that washed ashore for weeks. Ibrahim didn't just kill 280 women in cold blood. He destroyed them because he was bored, because he suspected they might be unfaithful, because absolute power had rotted his mind so completely that human life meant nothing. The Ottoman Empire spanned 3 continents, commanded armies of millions, yet they couldn't stop one madman from committing genocide in his own palace. Tonight, we uncover the truth about Sultan Ibrahim the Mad. The ruler so monstrous, his own mother ordered his execution. The despot whose reign of terror finally broke the most powerful empire on earth. This is the story they don't want you to know. This is the real face of absolute power. To understand how Ibrahim became a monster, we must go back to 1615. The year he was born into hell. Ibrahim entered the world as Prince of the Ottoman Empire. But this wasn't a blessing. It was a death sentence. Ottoman law was brutal. Only one prince could inherit the throne. The rest had to die. Every brother was a potential threat. Every cousin a future enemy. So the palace had a solution. The caves. The cage. Picture a luxurious prison. Golden bars. Silk curtains. And absolute isolation. Ibrahim was locked inside at age 7. No friends. No education. No human contact except eunuch guards and concubines chosen by the Sultan. For 22 years, Ibrahim watched the world through those golden bars. He watched his brothers taken away in the night. He heard their screams echo through the palace corridors. One by one they disappeared. Salim, Bayezid, Suleiman, Qasim, all executed on their father's orders. All because they might one day challenge the throne. Ibrahim kept count. He carved their names into the walls of his cell. By 1640 he was the last prince alive. The isolation broke him. Palace physicians recorded his symptoms. Violent outbursts, sexual obsessions, conversations with imaginary people. The cage had created exactly what it was designed to prevent. A madman. But madmen don't usually become sultan. Ibrahim should have died like his brothers. Instead, fate had other plans. September 8, 1640. Sultan Murad IV collapses during a military campaign. Dead at 27. No sons. No heirs. The Ottoman succession crisis begins immediately. The empire needs a sultan. The only surviving male in the royal bloodline? Ibrahim, the broken prince in the golden cage. For the first time in 22 years, those cage doors open. Ibrahim steps out into sunlight, blinking like a nocturnal animal. Palace officials kneel before this trembling, deranged man. They have no choice. Long live Sultan Ibrahim I. The coronation happens within hours. No time for preparation. No training in statecraft. A madman is handed control of an empire stretching from Hungary to Yemen. From Algeria to Persia. 16 million subjects. The largest military force on earth. Unlimited wealth and power. All given to a man who hasn't had a normal conversation in 2 decades. Ibrahim's first decree? Release every prisoner in the empire. Murderers, thieves, political enemies. All freed because the new sultan remembers what captivity feels like. His second decree? Empty the imperial treasury. Ibrahim orders celebrations lasting weeks. Food for every citizen. Gold thrown from palace windows. Massive construction projects. The empire bleeds money. But these aren't the actions of a generous ruler. They're the desperate acts of a damaged mind trying to prove its own worth. Palace chroniclers record Ibrahim's strange behaviors from day one. He refuses to wear the same clothes twice. He demands meals prepared by different chefs every hour. He speaks to portraits of dead relatives. And then he discovers the harem. 300 women, all his property. All at his complete disposal. For a man who spent 22 years in sexual isolation, this isn't luxury. It's an obsession waiting to explode. The imperial harem. For centuries, it was the most guarded secret in the Ottoman Empire. Hundreds of women from across the known world. Circassians, Georgians, Slavs. All brought to serve the sultan's pleasure. Previous sultans treated the harem as a political tool. Marriage alliances, diplomatic gifts, a way to secure loyalty from conquered territories. Ibrahim saw something different. He saw toys. Within weeks of his coronation, disturbing reports emerge from the harem quarters. Ibrahim isn't interested in traditional concubines. He wants women who fit his twisted specifications. First specification, weight. Ibrahim demands only the heaviest women. Not just curvy, obese. He sends scouts across the empire with specific instructions. Find women over 200 pounds. Virgin women over 200 pounds. Palace records show the payments. Scouts receive bonuses for every overweight woman they deliver. Families are paid fortunes to surrender their heaviest daughters. Some are taken by force. The harem becomes a feeding ground. Ibrahim orders his women force-fed. Multiple meals per day. Desserts between every course. Guards monitor their weight gain like livestock. But weight isn't Ibrahim's only obsession. He develops fetishes that shock even the jaded palace staff. He demands all his women wear furs during intimate encounters. Sable, ermine, fox. He covers the harem floors with animal pelts. The empire's finest furriers work overtime. Trade routes shift to accommodate Ibrahim's demands. The treasury hemorrhages gold buying furs from Russia, Scandinavia, and Central Asia. Palace physicians document Ibrahim's behavior. He sleeps surrounded by fur-covered women. He eats meals off their bodies. He forces them to bark like animals during his visits. The harem grows from 300 women to over 800. Ibrahim collects them like objects. When he tires of one, he sells her to his ministers. When another displeases him, she disappears. But collecting isn't enough. Ibrahim needs control. Total, absolute control over every aspect of their lives. And control, for a madman, eventually becomes violence. If you're disturbed by what you've heard so far, you need to subscribe to Throne of Lies. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing you the darkest secrets of power that history tried to hide. Because if we don't tell these stories, who will? By 1642, Ibrahim's madness had found its focus. Fur. Not just any fur. Sable. The finest, most expensive pelts on earth. Each sable coat cost more than a warship. Ibrahim wanted thousands of them. Palace records reveal the staggering expenses. In a single month, Ibrahim spent 40,000 gold ducats on Russian sables. Enough money to feed Constantinople for a year. But owning fur wasn't enough. Ibrahim needed to be surrounded by it, consumed by it. He ordered the throne room stripped and redecorated. Every surface covered in sable pelts. The walls, the ceiling, even the floor became a sea of dark fur. Visitors described walking into the palace like entering the belly of a massive beast. Ibrahim's personal chambers underwent the same transformation. His bed became a mountain of pelts. His clothes were lined with fur on the inside. Even his undergarments were trimmed with ermine. The harem received special treatment. Ibrahim commissioned fur-lined rooms for his most favored concubines. Women were forced to sleep on beds of animal pelts. They wore fur robes in the Mediterranean heat. Some fainted from overheating. Ibrahim didn't care. But the obsession grew darker. Palace staff reported Ibrahim's intimate requirements. Every encounter with his concubines had to involve fur. Women were wrapped in pelts like packages. Others were forced to crawl across rooms covered in animal skins. The smell became unbearable. Hundreds of animal pelts in the Turkish heat created a stench that penetrated the entire palace. Foreign ambassadors complained of the odor. Some refused to enter the throne room. Trade routes across Europe shifted to feed Ibrahim's appetite. Furriers from Moscow to Stockholm worked exclusively for the Ottoman court. The Sultan's agents bought entire warehouses of pelts before they could reach other markets. While Ibrahim played with fur, his empire began to collapse. Military budgets were slashed to pay for pelts. Soldiers went without pay while their sultan wrapped himself in dead animals. The madness was becoming impossible to hide. Ibrahim's second obsession proved even more disturbing. He wanted his women heavy, massively heavy. The traditional Ottoman harem valued beauty, grace, intelligence. Ibrahim valued pounds. Any woman under 200 pounds was immediately expelled from his presence. Palace physicians documented his requirements. Each new concubine was weighed upon arrival. Those who didn't meet Ibrahim's standards were sold to lesser officials or sent back to their families in shame. But finding naturally heavy women wasn't enough. Ibrahim instituted feeding programs that transformed the harem into a human livestock operation. The imperial kitchen received new orders. Prepare massive meals for the harem. Multiple courses, rich sauces, endless desserts. Women were expected to eat continuously throughout the day. Eunuch guards monitored every meal. They recorded what each woman consumed. Those who refused to eat were punished. Those who lost weight faced Ibrahim's rage. The results were documented by palace chroniclers. Women who arrived at normal weights gained 50, 70, even 100 pounds within months. Many developed health problems. Some died from the forced feeding. Ibrahim showed no concern. He sent recruitment agents across the empire with specific instructions. Find the heaviest virgins available. No expense was too great. Families were offered fortunes for their overweight daughters. The agents became notorious throughout Ottoman territories. They carried scales and measuring devices. Villages learned to hide their heavier daughters when the Sultan's men approached. When natural recruitment failed, Ibrahim ordered abductions. Palace records show payments to soldiers for acquiring suitable women. Families woke to find their daughters missing, only to learn they'd been taken to satisfy the Sultan's appetites. Guards who allowed thin women near Ibrahim faced immediate execution. The palace executioner worked overtime, killing servants whose only crime was inadequate screening of the Sultan's visitors. The empire's resources were redirected to feed this obsession. Food that should have supplied the military went to overfeed harem women. Grain meant for hungry provinces disappeared into the palace kitchens. But Ibrahim's madness was about more than physical preferences. It was about absolute control. The power to reshape human beings according to his twisted desires. And absolute power, in the hands of a madman, always demands more victims. While Ibrahim played with fur and force-fed women, the Ottoman Empire burned. 1645. The Cretans revolt against Ottoman rule. Instead of responding militarily, Ibrahim spends 3 weeks designing new fur-lined chambers for his harem. 1646. Venetian naval forces attack Ottoman shipping in the Mediterranean. Ibrahim's response? He orders his fleet commanders to bring him heavier women from captured vessels. The empire's enemies smell weakness. For the first time in centuries, Christian powers coordinate attacks against Ottoman territories. They know the Sultan is insane. They know he's not coming. Grand Vizier Sultanzade Mehmed Pasha attempts to intervene. He requests meetings with Ibrahim to discuss military strategy. The Sultan refuses unless the meetings take place in his fur-lined throne room, with his heaviest concubines present. The treasury reports become increasingly desperate. Military salaries 6 months behind. Provincial governors begging for funds to maintain order. Meanwhile, Ibrahim spends more on pelts than the entire imperial navy's annual budget. Foreign ambassadors report back to their kingdoms with descriptions of the madness. The French envoy writes, "The Ottoman Sultan has lost all reason. He speaks only of animal skins and women's weight. The empire governs itself. Ottoman military commanders begin making independent decisions. Without orders from Constantinople, they retreat from losing battles. Without pay, soldiers desert in massive numbers. The empire's legendary military machine starts to crumble. Public unrest grows in the capital. Constantinople's citizens go hungry while the palace consumes vast quantities of food for the harem feeding programs. Bread riots break out in the marketplace. The Janissaries, the empire's elite military corps, petition the Sultan directly. They need equipment, pay, leadership. Ibrahim's written response survives in palace archives. Bring me women heavier than your shields. Religious leaders begin questioning Ibrahim's fitness to rule. Islamic law permits the removal of a sultan who proves mentally incompetent. Secret meetings occur in mosque backrooms. The empire's spiritual authority starts to turn against its temporal ruler. But Ibrahim remains oblivious. His world has shrunk to the confines of his fur-covered chambers and overweight concubines. Reality, for him, extends no further than his next bizarre pleasure. The empire that once threatened to conquer Europe now struggles to maintain basic order. All because one madman values animal pelts more than human lives. February 1648. Ibrahim's paranoia finally overtakes his obsessions. It starts with whispers. Palace servants gossiping about the harem. Eunuch guards sharing jokes about the sultan's bizarre requirements. Normal conversation in any royal court. But in Ibrahim's fractured mind, whispers become conspiracies. He becomes convinced his concubines are mocking him, plotting against him, planning to escape or, worse, to betray imperial secrets to foreign powers. Ibrahim orders increased surveillance of the harem. Guards are instructed to report every conversation, every laugh, every glance between women. The reports fuel his paranoia. Women talking during meals become evidence of conspiracy. Those who comfort crying friends are obviously planning rebellion. Even silence becomes suspicious behavior. Ibrahim's interrogations grow violent. Women are dragged from their chambers for questioning. They're asked about conversations that never happened. Forced to confess to plots they never planned. The palace dungeons, emptied during Ibrahim's early reign, fill again with accused conspirators. Women who once shared his bed now await execution for imaginary crimes. Dr. Panayotis, the palace physician, documents Ibrahim's deteriorating mental state. Violent mood swings, hours spent talking to himself, complete detachment from reality. The physician's notes recommend immediate intervention. But intervention requires someone brave enough to confront an insane sultan. Someone with the authority to act. Someone willing to risk execution for questioning imperial decisions. Ibrahim's mother, Kozum Sultan, finally recognizes what her son has become. The woman who survived decades of palace intrigue, who helped rule an empire, watches her child transform into a monster. She attempts to reason with him. Palace records show her requesting meetings. Ibrahim refuses to see her unless she wears fur and gains 50 pounds. His own mother isn't exempt from his madness. The final trigger comes from the simplest source. A young concubine named Seeker laughs during an evening meal. Just a laugh. Perhaps at a friend's joke. Perhaps from nervousness. Ibrahim hears that laugh from across the harem. In his diseased mind, it becomes the sound of ultimate betrayal. The proof of a massive conspiracy against his rule. That night, he makes a decision that will stain Ottoman history forever. If his women are conspirators, they must all die. Not just the suspected conspirators. All of them. Every single woman in the imperial harem. 280 human beings. Their only crime? Existing in the presence of a madman. The worst is yet to come. And I guarantee you've never heard this story before. But channels like Throne of Lies can only survive with your support. We're fighting to hit 1,000 subscribers to unlock the tools we need to research and produce these incredible untold stories. Don't let the algorithm bury the truth. Subscribe now. February 12, 1648. 3 in the morning. Ibrahim summons his chief executioner to a private chamber. Hassan Aga enters expecting routine orders. Perhaps a few political prisoners. Maybe a rebellious minister. What he hears instead changes Ottoman history forever. Every woman in the harem dies tonight. The executioner stares at his sultan. 280 women. Not criminals. Not traitors. Concubines who exist solely for Ibrahim's pleasure. My sultan, perhaps we could. Tonight. All of them. Palace archives preserve Hassan Aga's testimony from later interrogations. Ibrahim's reasoning was simple, he said. The women had been corrupted. They whispered about him. They laughed at his requirements. They threatened the purity of his bloodline. In Ibrahim's shattered mind, every woman in the harem had become an enemy agent. Foreign spies sent to humiliate him. Assassins waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The logistics of mass murder require planning. Ibrahim had been thinking about this for weeks. No public executions. Too visible. No poisoning. Too slow. No blade work. Too bloody. Drowning. Clean. Quiet. Complete. Hassan Aga attempts to dissuade his sultan. He requests time to investigate the alleged conspiracy. He suggests exile instead of execution. He offers to personally interrogate each woman. Ibrahim's response chills the executioner's blood. They breathe my air without permission. Tonight, they stop breathing altogether. Grand Vizier Sultan Zaid Mehmed Pasha receives an urgent summons at 4 in the morning. He arrives to find Ibrahim pacing his fur-covered chambers, muttering about betrayal and corruption. The Grand Vizier tries reason. These women are valuable property. Some were diplomatic gifts from allied kingdoms. Others represent massive financial investments. Killing them serves no political purpose. Ibrahim's answer reveals the depth of his madness. I own them. I can destroy them. Tonight proves my power is absolute. The palace scrambles to organize the horror. Executioners are sworn to secrecy under penalty of death. Boats are prepared at the imperial docks. Weighted sacks are sewn by palace seamstresses who believe they're making grain storage. Dr. Panayotis, the palace physician, makes one final attempt to intervene. He suggests Ibrahim might be suffering from temporary madness brought on by stress. Perhaps rest and medical treatment could resolve the sultan's concerns about the harem. Ibrahim's response: madness is seeing threats everywhere. Sanity is eliminating them. By sunset on February 12th, everything is ready. The boats, the sacks, the executioners. The only thing left is the killing. Palace records show that 17 officials attempted to dissuade Ibrahim that day. Ministers, military commanders, religious leaders. Even his own mother sent messengers begging for mercy. None of it mattered. In Ibrahim's mind, the conspiracy was real. The threat was immediate. The solution was final. As darkness falls over Constantinople, the most horrific mass murder in Ottoman history begins. Midnight, February 12th. The harem quarters fall silent. Eunuch guards receive their orders. Bring the women to the lower chambers. Tell them nothing. Use force if necessary. One by one, they're led from their rooms. Some think they're being relocated. Others sense something wrong and begin to panic. The guards show no emotion. They've been threatened with their own deaths if they resist. In the palace workshops, seamstresses work by candlelight. They're sewing leather sacks, large enough for human bodies, each one weighted with stones from the palace gardens. The women are told they're being moved to a new wing of the palace. A few believe it. Most don't. When they see the leather sacks, some begin to scream. Hassan Aga supervises the operation with mechanical efficiency. Each woman is forced into a sack. The leather is sewn shut while they're still breathing. The stones ensure they'll sink immediately. Palace chronicler Naima later interviewed surviving executioners. They described the sounds. Women pleading for their lives. Others praying in languages from across the empire. Some calling out names of children they'd never see again. The first boat launches at 1 in the morning. 20 women sewn into sacks like cargo. The Bosphorus runs black under winter clouds. The execution site was chosen carefully. The deepest part of the strait, where strong currents would carry bodies out to the Black Sea, where evidence would disappear forever. Boat after boat makes the journey. Each trip carries 20 sacks. Each sack contains a living, breathing human being. The executioners follow strict orders. No quick deaths. No mercy killings. The women must be alive when they hit the water. Ibrahim wants them to drown, not simply die and then be disposed of. One woman manages to tear a hole in her sack as it's being loaded. Sivikar, a Circassian girl barely 18 years old. She sees the water, understands what's happening, and begins screaming in Turkish, "I have done nothing! I have done nothing!" Her cries wake other women in nearby sacks. The sound becomes a chorus of terror echoing across the water. But there's no rescue coming. No last-minute reprieve. The boats keep launching. The sacks keep sinking. By 4 in the morning, it's over. 280 women have been murdered. The largest single-day massacre in Ottoman palace history. Sivikar's sack was poorly sewn. The executioners were exhausted, careless. As her weighted bag hits the water, the hole she tore widens. She slips out, gasping, desperate. The current carries her toward shore. Half drowned, freezing, traumatized beyond comprehension, she becomes the only witness to survive. Her testimony, recorded years later by palace historians, provides the only first-hand account of that night. She describes the sensation of drowning, the panic of being trapped in leather and stones, the sounds of other women dying around her. Most horrifically, she describes the silence afterward. The way the Bosphorus looked peaceful again once all the screaming stopped. 280 women murdered because a madman heard laughter and imagined conspiracy. Dawn breaks over Constantinople. The palace moves quickly to hide what happened. Official records list the women as relocated to provincial estates. Palace staff are told the harem was reorganized for efficiency. Anyone asking specific questions faces immediate arrest. But mass murder is impossible to hide completely. By the afternoon of February 13th, bodies begin washing ashore. The Bosphorus currents didn't carry everything out to sea as planned. Some sacks caught on rocks. Others washed up on beaches near the palace. Fishermen find the first body near Galata Bridge. A young woman still partially sewn into a leather sack. Word spreads quickly through Constantinople's markets. Palace guards are dispatched to collect the evidence. They patrol the shoreline, gathering bodies before civilians can examine them too closely. But they can't be everywhere. More bodies appear daily. The Bosphorus becomes a source of horror instead of commerce. Fish sellers refuse to work the waters where so many corpses float. Foreign diplomats report the rumors to their home countries. European courts receive dispatches describing mass murder in the Ottoman palace. The Sultan's reputation becomes international scandal. The palace tries multiple cover stories. First, they claim the women died of plague. Then, they suggest a fire killed them accidentally. Finally, they blame political enemies for spreading lies about the Sultan. None of it works. Too many people saw too much. Palace servants whisper the truth in Constantinople's taverns. Fishermen describe finding sewn bodies. Foreign merchants carry the story across Europe. Within weeks, the Ottoman Empire's diplomatic relations suffer catastrophic damage. Christian kingdoms that feared Ottoman power now see it as led by a madman. Trade partnerships dissolve. Military alliances crumble. The economic impact becomes immediate. European buyers cancel orders for Ottoman goods. They don't want products from an empire ruled by a mass murderer. Constantinople's markets suffer as international commerce dies. Religious leaders face a crisis of conscience. Islamic law strictly forbids the murder of innocents. The Sultan has committed one of the greatest sins imaginable. Some refuse to pray for Ibrahim's health during Friday services. Ibrahim's mother, Kozum Sultan, recognizes that her son has crossed a line from which there's no return. She begins secret meetings with military commanders. The empire cannot survive with a mass murderer on the throne. Even Ibrahim's closest supporters abandon him. Ministers who defended his eccentric behavior can't justify genocide. Palace guards request transfers to avoid serving a madman. The cover-up fails completely within a month. Everyone knows what happened. Everyone knows who ordered it. The only question becomes what to do about it. For the first time in Ottoman history, serious discussions begin about removing a sultan not for political reasons, but for moral ones. The empire's survival depends on stopping a monster. But monsters with absolute power don't surrender easily. And Ibrahim still has 6 months left to inflict more horror on his people. This level of evil was covered up for centuries, and most history books still won't tell you the full truth. That's why Throne of Lies exists, to expose what the powerful want buried. Subscribe now and help us hold the powerful accountable, even across centuries. March 1648. 1 month after the massacre, Kozum Sultan sits in her private chambers, staring at reports from across the empire. She built this dynasty, survived 5 sultans, navigated decades of palace intrigue, ruled an empire through cunning and ruthless intelligence. Now her own son threatens to destroy everything she created. The reports paint a catastrophic picture. Provincial governors openly questioning Constantinople's authority. Military units refusing orders from a sultan they consider insane. Trade revenues collapsing as foreign partners abandon Ottoman markets. But the economic damage pales beside the moral crisis. Kozum Sultan didn't climb to power by being sentimental, but even she recognizes certain lines cannot be crossed. Mass murder of innocents is one of them. She begins with careful inquiries. Trusted allies. Palace officials who've served the dynasty for decades. The conversations are subtle, dangerous. Questioning a sultan's fitness to rule is treason punishable by death. But the responses surprise her. Everyone shares her concerns. Everyone recognizes the empire cannot survive with a madman on the throne. Grand Vizier Sultanzade Mehmed Pasha agrees to meet secretly. The conversation takes place in a mosque, away from palace spies. Both participants pray before speaking. What they're discussing could cost them their lives. The Grand Vizier reveals additional horrors. Ibrahim has ordered the execution of anyone who mentions the drowned women. Palace servants disappear daily. The Sultan's paranoia grows worse each week. More disturbing, Ibrahim is planning another massacre. This time targeting palace staff who witnessed the harem murders. Hundreds more innocent lives hang in the balance. Kozum Sultan realizes her son cannot be reasoned with, cannot be controlled, cannot be allowed to continue ruling. The next secret meeting includes the Janissary commanders. These are the empire's most elite soldiers, men who've sworn absolute loyalty to the Sultan. Asking them to betray their oath requires extraordinary justification. The justification comes from Islamic law itself. The Quran permits removing a ruler who becomes a threat to his own people. Mass murder of innocents violates every principle of Islamic governance. Sahil Islam Yahya Effendi, the empire's highest religious authority, provides the legal framework. A sultan who commits genocide against his own subjects forfeits his divine right to rule. The empire has not just the right, but the obligation to stop him. The plotting moves carefully. Too many people involved risks exposure. Too few people means insufficient force to overcome Ibrahim's loyal guards. They choose their moment strategically. Ibrahim spends most of his time in the harem quarters, surrounded by the new women he's acquired to replace the murdered ones. He's isolated, vulnerable, often intoxicated on opium. The plan is simple. Surround the harem with loyal janissaries. Cut off Ibrahim's escape routes. Force his abdication in favor of his young son Mehmed. If Ibrahim refuses to abdicate peacefully, they'll remove him by force. Kozum Sultan insists on one condition. Her son must be given the chance to surrender. Despite everything he's done, despite the horror he's unleashed, she still hopes to save his life. But hope, in the face of such madness, proves tragically naive. August 8, 1648. The palace revolt begins at dawn. Janissary units surround the harem quarters. Palace guards loyal to Ibrahim find themselves outnumbered 10 to 1. Most surrender without fighting. They have no desire to die protecting a mass murderer. Ibrahim wakes to find armed soldiers outside his chambers. His first reaction isn't fear, it's rage. How dare anyone challenge his absolute authority? Grand Vizier Sultan Zaid Mehmed Pasha delivers the ultimatum. Abdicate immediately in favor of Prince Mehmed. Accept exile to a comfortable prison. Avoid further bloodshed. Ibrahim's response reveals how completely madness has consumed him. He demands the soldiers kneel and beg forgiveness. He threatens to have them all executed for treason. He insists Allah supports his right to rule. The negotiation lasts 3 hours. Kozum Sultan arrives to plead with her son personally. She describes the empire's collapse, the international humiliation, the moral crisis his actions have created. Ibrahim listens to none of it. In his diseased mind, everyone else is wrong. Everyone else is treasonous. Everyone else deserves death. At noon on August 8th, the Janissaries lose patience. They storm Ibrahim's chambers, overpower his remaining guards, and drag the Sultan from his throne. The deposition ceremony happens immediately. 7-year-old Prince Mehmed is proclaimed Sultan Mehmed IV. The child has no understanding of what's happening. He cries for his father. Ibrahim is imprisoned in the same chambers where he once held political enemies. The irony isn't lost on palace observers. The madman who filled dungeons with innocent victims now occupies a cell himself. For 4 days, debate rages about Ibrahim's fate. Some argue for permanent imprisonment. Others insist exile to a distant province. A few suggest forcing him to become a monk. But Ibrahim's supporters haven't completely disappeared. Rumors spread that loyal guards are planning a rescue attempt. Foreign enemies might try to restore him as a puppet ruler. Keeping him alive poses ongoing risks. More importantly, Ibrahim shows no remorse. Palace guards report him ranting about returning to power, about executing everyone involved in his removal, about drowning even more women to prove his authority. The man who murdered 280 innocents remains completely unrepentant. On August 12, 1648, the decision is made. Kozum Sultan gives the final order herself. Her own son must die for the empire's survival. The execution method follows Ottoman tradition. A silk bowstring, quick, relatively painless, preserving some dignity even in death. Hassan Aga, the same executioner who supervised the harem massacre, performs the final task. Ibrahim dies at sunset, strangled in the same palace where he once wielded absolute power. His last words, recorded by witnesses, "I am the Sultan. You cannot do this to me." Even facing death, he couldn't comprehend that absolute power has limits, that actions have consequences, that even sultans can go too far. Kozum Sultan arrives moments after her son's death. She stares at his body for several minutes without speaking. Finally, she utters the words that define Ibrahim's legacy. "My son was no longer human. The woman who helped build an empire had to destroy her own child to save it." August 12, 1648. Ibrahim the Mad is dead. But the damage he inflicted on the Ottoman Empire proves irreversible. The numbers tell the story. In 8 years of rule, Ibrahim bankrupted the imperial treasury. Military defeats cost the empire Cyprus, Crete, and territories across Eastern Europe. Trade revenues collapsed by 60%. But the real damage wasn't economic. It was psychological. For 3 centuries, the Ottoman Empire commanded respect through strength and competence. Enemies feared Ottoman armies. Allies trusted Ottoman promises. The Sultan's word carried absolute authority across 3 continents. Ibrahim destroyed that reputation in a single night. February 12, 1648 proved that the most powerful ruler on earth could be completely insane. That absolute power offered no protection against moral collapse. European kingdoms that once trembled at Ottoman expansion now saw weakness. They coordinated attacks that would have been unthinkable during previous reigns. The empire that once threatened to conquer Vienna began losing territory it had held for generations. The massacre's international impact lasted decades. Foreign courts referenced Ibrahim's madness in diplomatic correspondence well into the next century. The Ottoman Empire never fully recovered its prestige. More importantly, Ibrahim's reign revealed the fundamental flaw in absolute monarchy. When all power rests in one person, that person's madness becomes everyone's catastrophe. 280 innocent women died because no system existed to stop a madman. No checks on imperial power. No accountability for imperial actions. No protection for imperial subjects. The Ottoman Empire learned this lesson too late. By the time they removed Ibrahim, the damage was permanent. The empire began a slow decline that lasted until its final collapse in 1918. But this isn't just ancient history. Ibrahim's story echoes through every dictatorship, every authoritarian regime, every concentration of unchecked power. Today we call it checks and balances, constitutional limits, democratic accountability. These concepts exist because history teaches us what happens when they don't. Every tyrant believes his power is absolute. Every dictator considers his actions justified. Every authoritarian ruler thinks normal rules don't apply to him. Ibrahim thought exactly the same thing, right up until the moment his own mother ordered his execution. Power without accountability always ends in horror. The only variable is how many innocent people die before that horror stops. Ibrahim's story was buried for centuries, hidden in palace archives, dismissed as exaggeration, forgotten by history books that prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. But the truth matters. The 280 women who drowned in the Bosphorus deserve to be remembered. Their stories deserve to be told. Their deaths deserve to mean something. That's why Throne of Lies exists, to dig up the buried truths, to expose the comfortable lies, to remind the world that power without accountability always ends in blood. Ibrahim's story was buried for centuries, but Throne of Lies brought you the truth. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Every tyrant's secret we expose makes the world a little more honest. The truth about power needs to be told, and it starts with you hitting that subscribe button. Because the alternative is forgetting. And when we forget what unchecked power can do, we become vulnerable to the next Ibrahim. The next madman with absolute authority. The next tyrant who thinks human lives are disposable. The women of the Ottoman harem couldn't speak for themselves. But we can speak for them. We can ensure their deaths weren't meaningless. We can make sure their story never gets buried again.